Hello everybody, today we are going to be continuing our Regulation G restricted guides, this time with Giratina and Giratina Origin. I am once again going to loop them together, making two separate videos. Really didn't make a whole lot of sense for Pokemon that are pretty much the exact same Pokemon but with a few minor changes. Overall though, once again, very similar to pretty much everything we have left in these guides. Giratina, not doing a whole lot. This video is probably going to be a little bit quicker. I only have one set for each form. But either way, we're going to go over Giratina in case you guys are trying to use it. But if I don't know, I feel like you're working a little bit harder to win with Giratina, much like some of the other restricteds nowadays. But you don't have a lot going for you. If you go with the regular Giratina form, your abilities are mediocre at best. Pressure is a cool ability given the fact that everything only really has 8 PP in this format, because like you get like surging strikes, you just get to chip down, they're eventually gonna run out. Astral Barrage only has 8, but you're not gonna make them take 8. It's not gonna take 4 Astral Barrages in this case to take you out, right? But they will lose Astral Barrage PP pretty quickly versus you, right? And other thing of the like, so maybe that's a pretty cool option for you there. Then Telepathy is always just a fun ability. Anytime you're able to like spam Earthquake or anything of the like besides your big restricted, just to get more damage on the board, you know, it's decent, right? We've seen it with the Dialgas, with the Ursaluna beside it for some of these games. But overall, I don't think any of these abilities are really doing Giratina any justice. And then you've got its very lackluster stats. You know, it is a very defensive restricted, but it's a very defensive restricted that doesn't really exert a lot of pressure in return, because we saw this with Zamazenta in Sword and Shield. When it didn't have access to body press, it was a very defensive restricted, and it was one of the most lackluster restricteds we had. Now Zamazenta has access to that body press, and yeah, it's still a defensive restricted because it's very hard to take down, but it can actually apply pressure back, and I think that's where Giratina misses out. It doesn't actually apply the pressure back onto the board that you want it to apply onto the board, right? Like 150, 120, 120 is insane amounts of bulk. Like both of the spreads I'm going to be recommending are living like Astral Barrages, Glacial Lances. Like the amount of bulk that you have on this piece is incredible, right? The problem is with 100 and 100, and I hate to say it, because 100 isn't even that low, but you really don't pressure anything back. You've got a lot of good coverage moves. You can go physical or special, right? You get to go with, you know, you got a lot of tech moves, Aura Sphere, Shadow Ball. You go Bulldoze if you really want it to be cheeky for speed control. Calm Mind is a very cool setup option. Draco Meteor. You even get Dual Wing Beat. Why? I don't know. You get Energy Ball. That's kind of cool, right? Earth Power. Hex is pretty fun. Icy Wind for speed control, right? My point being is there's a lot of cool options that you get. You just don't really do anything with them. Like Earth Power doesn't do a lot of damage to anything you want Earth Power to do. You really need that Calm Mind to go off. And even if you take the more offensive Giratina, where you have to hold the core, and you switch your defenses and your attacks, so now you get 150, 100, 100, which is still incredible bulk, and you get 120 in each of your attack stats. The problem is, you still don't quite do enough to justify using it as your restricted. Now, I have a couple sets here we're going to quickly go over. And as always, guys, these are just baselines and kind of hitting the benchmarks. And I've had a bunch of comments, actually, about Terra Steel Origin Form Giratina. And I think it's very funny. Once again, as I have responded to a few of those comments, I think it's a little bit in one of those spots where you have to work that much harder to get it to work. And I'm working that much harder to get Giratina to success. I feel like there's better restricteds. But you know what? Terra Steel Giratina, definitely a very viable option for Giratina if you're trying to make Giratina work. We'll put it that way. I don't know how else to say it. Of course, good news is here, you don't have to do any thinking. You have to hold the Grisius core. And you don't have to worry about it. You just get to hold the core, and you don't have to worry about what item am I going to put on this thing. That's pretty solid. And of course, more importantly, you get Levitate. Main reason why Terra Steel is so good, because you go Terra Steel and you're really only weak to fire and fighting at that point, and you're not weak to, you're immune to fighting if you don't Terra, which plays some mind games. And then Terra Steel is a very good defensive typing in general, especially if you can get away from a dragon typing, right? So the Terra synergy works really, really well there. And my main issue with Giratina is you get teams and you get spreads that look like this. Don't ask me what is happening here. This might be one of the ugliest spreads I've ever created, but I will explain my thought process here, okay? I promise. I'm not insane. I promise I'm not insane. But anyways, moveset. This can be Hex or Shadow Ball pretty consistently. Actually, could just be a dragon move as well. I liked the concept of Hex. Hex is still gets the one shot on those Calyrex shadows if they're not very bulky. But then the concept was that I'm gonna be on the field for a little bit of little while, so I can go Wisp into Hex. I also had this beside Namungus for like Pollen Puff stuff, so I could also Spore and then click Hex. So Hex made a little bit of sense. Right? This could easily be Shadow Ball, could easily be the Dragon move. Same with Earth Power, it can really be whatever tech move you see fit. Earth Power, Aura Sphere is very cool if you think that maybe it's going to do enough to Terapagos, but I don't think it's doing enough to Terapagos, and Earth Power just felt like the naturally correct move to put here, right? And then I opted for Shadow Sneak because I went with a mix set here. And I think having Shadow Sneak to pressure off Cali Shadows before they really try to hurt you is incredible, right? Whether you are forcing them to Terra Fairy and then beating it up with one of your Steel types later on, or they've already Terra'd and your Shadow Sneak just wins an endgame because you're going to be faster than it and you're going to remove it, right? That is two very strong options right there. And then, of course, I ran Will-O-Wisp on this set because I think it is very cool. It paired nicely with Hex. You don't necessarily need Protect on a piece like this. You're pretty bulky. You can kind of force the issue, but there's nothing wrong if you wanted to put Protect here. Tons of options here, like I was saying earlier. I mean, Phantom Force. What's your actual signature move again? What's that move called? I'm going to find it, guys. It's not Phantom Force. It's the other one. I never remember what it's called. Shadow Force. That's right. Shadow Force, which, I mean, is cool. It's a 2-turn move. It gets you off the field for a turn and it breaks through Protect. But, like, I don't think it's enough. Will-O-Wisp is probably pretty consistent, especially given how good Will-O-Wisp is in the format right now. Burning Calyrex Ice, burning Koraidons if they don't Terra. Speaking of Koraidon, you completely wall that piece out. Giratina has a very good matchup versus Koraidon and versus Zamazenta. You beat both of them in a 1v1. You just will beat both in a 1v1. If you Terra Steel, you can outrun the Calyrex Ices as well. So interesting right there. You do have some matchups where Giratina can be brought to. So it's definitely not like the worst Pokemon of all time. But like it really doesn't do a whole lot. And we're going to get into the spread now. So not a lot going on right now. 28-204 lives Spell Tag Astro Barrage from Calyrex Shadow 100% of the time. And the concept there was, didn't really need to live that, but the Spell Tag ones can be a tad bit bulkier. So I wanted to make sure that just in case my Shadow Sneak missed a KO in a 1v1, lived that Barrage and then, you know, go back from there. Although if it's a 1v1, then I guess the Astro Barrage wouldn't be spread and I'm dead anyways. So, I don't know. Regardless, though, maybe it wouldn't be a 1v1. But the fact of the matter is you're able to get a couple Shadow Sneaks off versus that Spell Tag there. And 76 attack is actually the bump in attack. I had 68 because you only need 68 for your Shadow Sneak to pick off no bulk Calyrex, right? But I was so close to the bump that I might as well have taken it. So we went 76 plus on the bump right here. And I wasn't going to invest more than that, right? There's no real reason to invest more. I would have loved to really not put anything into attack, right? Like I would have loved to go 0 here, maybe go Modest, right? And then drop some speed in here and then maybe pair this thing on Tailwind. But if I'm going to do that, I have to drop Shadow Sneak, and I really wanted to showcase Shadow Sneak on this set, so we're not going to do that today. But that is a viable option, you know? Maybe function this with Tailwind, drop Shadow Sneak, put like a Draco Meteor there, and get some more offensive damage onto the board. But the problem with Giratina's offensive damage, it's still not a lot of damage output, right? So we'll go back to what I had originally here, which is 76 and 0. But you know, there's just not a lot going for. But like I said, that was for the Shadow Sneak, and then it was so close to the bump, I hit the bump. The 140 was the dump into the rest of the special defense. I do not remember what the defense was for. I put it in. It was living something. I don't remember what it was living. And then I just, like I said, dumped that rest into special attack to at least do some sort of damage. I think this spread is incredibly bad. If you are going to take this Giratina and you're going to try and run it, I would try to look into the spread a little bit more. But as a baseline to see maybe if Giratina is somewhat viable, you can go ahead and take this spread and see if it works. But if you are struggling because you feel like you're missing KOs or you're not living things you want to be living, I would look into the spread before I drop Giratina, because I don't think, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm not going to be that type of YouTuber that comes out here and says this is the best Giratina spread you will ever see, right? I have no intention to do that. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I don't think this spread is amazing. It hits a couple cool checkpoints. Other than that, nothing really crazy going on with it. And I would definitely look into the spread if you were going to take it. Like I said, tons of options here. Hex Wisp was fun. But you can also, like I said, just go consistent with like a Shadow Ball, a Dragon move, and just like a Protect over here. And just go on to more offensive variant. Then you don't need attack at all. You can put some into speed. It makes a little bit of sense to do it that way as well. Right? And then the other set here is just going to be that Calm Mind setup. Terra Fairy Giratina. And there is not a lot right now that really breaks defensive fairy types, because there just aren't any defensive fairy types. So I think there's a lot of teams that are not ready for a defensive fairy type, and that's what you're going to see on this Giratina set. I went with Pressure because if we're trying to stall players out and trying to sit here and just Calm Mind bulk, they might as well run out of PP faster than they normally would. Now granted, you could go Telepathy on this set if you wanted to pair this with Earthquake or something along those lines, but I think Pressure is probably a little bit more consistent. And this is where the more consistent option shows up, and that's the Shadow Ball, your Earth Power, or whatever other tech move you choose. Very similar to the other set where you can say, okay, Earth Power is not really doing it for me on this team. I'm going to go like maybe like an Aura Sphere, or just drop my Dragon move here instead. Calm Mind, Protect, I think are staples on this variant. If I am going to use the base form Giratina, I am going to go Leftovers, I am going to go Bulk, I am going to go Calm Mind. And my concept with the Calm Mind is there's any of those special attackers don't appreciate you, right? You now still wall the Koraidons and the Giratina. The Giratinas. Nope, you are the Giratina. You still wall the Koraidon and the Zamazenta pretty consistently, right? They still really don't touch you all that much. Koraidon can't touch you at all. Zamazenta, I mean, I'm pretty confident a Behemoth Bash or a Heavy Slam is doing negligible damage to you, right? Heavy Slam for sure is doing nothing. Behemoth Bash might do a tad bit more. But overall, I think you outbulk that, especially with Protect and lefties, dropping Earth Powers off into it, right? And then you get the added benefit of you get a couple Calm Minds up, and you become a special wall now as well, which feels pretty strong. And then you need Protect because there's a lot of the calcs that end up with this Giratina. They do like 55% to you, right? So being able to get a Calm Mind up, take 55% from a physical attack, and then Protect and live another physical attack is really, really good, right? Because you just get the Leftovers to heal you back up into a spot where you're comfortable, taking another hit that's going to do another 55 to you, right? With Leftovers, you can also change some of the calcs to force them into that. I no longer need to calc for this to be a guaranteed 3-hit knockout because I'm going to have Leftovers. I need it to be a guaranteed 3-hit knockout after Leftovers recovery, which definitely allows it to be like a little bit more viable in my opinion. But it at the end of the day, there's not a lot going on here, guys. I hit the 240. 240 is my optimal lefties recovery number. If I'm going to run this Giratina, I actually recommend running it with Rillaboom as well. This Giratina plus Rillaboom makes a pretty strong defensive core. At that point, though, my only issue there is actually breaking through Incineroar, so I would find 4 other slots that can definitely have capabilities of doing that. But you get optimal lefties recovery. If you do pair it with Rillaboom, it's optimal grassy terrain recovery as well, so it just made sense to hit that. I'm not a huge fan of investing in HP when it's your highest stat. You get a lot more value out of investing in defense and special defense, which I normally try to do. But in this case, I wanted to hit that optimal, and no HP was just missing it. So, because 224, right? 224 would have been the next optimal, but no HP is just missing it. So you go up to 240 at that point, then dump the rest over there. Speed, once again, 113. You can play around with this speed tier. You really don't need it. But I feel like if there's every team in this format should have at least one form of speed control, whether that's going to be Electroweb, Tailwind, Icy Wind, Trick Room. If you're opting for any of the Icy Winds or the Electrowebs or the Tailwinds, right, 113 or 112 makes the most sense to me. Because then after, if you get 2 Electrowebs off, you're faster than Kali Shadow, which is something. If you get a Tailwind up, you're faster than Kali Shadow, which is still pretty good. That's kind of the cutoff part for these speed tiers here, right? You could technically go a little faster if you wanted to like get a Calm Mind up before like a Raging Bolt drop to Draco, but you should be faster than most Raging Bolts here anyways. Maybe go faster so you got a Calm Mind up before an Ogre drops a Water Spout, but with your bulk, you're not really scared about Ogre Water Spout all that much, right? So I think overall, the spread and like the speeds, the HP stat and the speed stat are probably pretty correct or very close to being correct. I went 76 plus. I would have liked this to be even. I'm going to be honest with you. I would have liked this to be even. That way when I'm at +1, it actually gets me the proper adjustment. It doesn't have to round down, but that's a very minuscule, minuscule adjustment. You really don't need that. Basically, this is going to live choice specs. Calyrex Shadow, actually, Astro Barrage, which is incredible because you just have insane amounts of bulk. 116 to special attack, so you actually are doing a little bit of damage. And then 116, 180 actually lives Terra Stellar Icicle Crash from Shenpao, which is probably pretty irrelevant because realistically, what am I doing back to said Shenpao? But maybe it allows me to be on the field and actually remove a piece that's beside the Shenpao, or win an endgame where that Shenpao is down to Sash and I can just Earth Power it off to win the endgame, right? So that was something that was, I was looking for something with it because I initially had, I think it was like 116 here. And I was like, I have 60 EVs. What do I live? So I was looking around for something, and the Shenpao one was one of the only ones that I was actually able to find. So we put it into that. Once again, I'm not going to lie, this spread is not the best spread in the world, but it's definitely a starting point if you're looking to build off of this bulky, Calm Mind Giratina. It's a starting point until you fine-tune your team. But it's a very decent starting point, in my opinion. You hit things that you want to hit. Earth Power is actually going to be a 2-shot on a lot of the instants, even if they're like very generally like a careful nature. Like if they're especially bulky, you're probably still 2-shotting as long as you get a Calm Mind up first, which feels pretty good. But I think I've talked about Giratina long enough, guys, okay? It's not really the most viable Pokemon, but if you want to use it, I think there's a chance for both forms to maybe serve a niche. Like I said, having a restricted that can take out Koraidon, that can take out Zamazenta is pretty strong, right? I think my problem is it doesn't do enough outside of that to really justify. Perhaps on a double restricted format, I could see these Pokemon doing something as like that secondary piece, right? Where no, my main restricted loses to Zamazenta. Okay, boom, my second restricted beats Zamazenta now, right? And I really do see that a lot. And I say that a lot in these guides here because everything just gets better with the second restricted. But justifying my only restricted slot for a Giratina feels a little questionable. But overall, we've got two valid options here. Terra Steel leftovers, Terra Steel origin form feels pretty strong if you are trying to run Giratina at the very least. And then you also got that Calm Mind variant. I don't like either of them in the meta currently right now, but maybe they serve a niche. I've talked about everything I could there. But with that, if you guys are enjoying these types of guides, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. And of course, I'm going to get on out of here. I will catch you all in a future video.